Hello there. I am so glad y'all are here tonight. I am Kat Hobson. I am the host of Paranormal Experienced. I am so glad to bring my guest to you tonight. You know, I love the holiday season despite the black t shirt, but it's been a day. But I have Christmas earrings. One of the things that I love the most about the holiday season are the stories. There's the sweet ones, there's the traditions with baking. I don't have anybody to bake with anymore, like adults. So I'm the grown up. I don't know how that happened. But anyway, so there's so much that goes into this season that matters to people. The the carols, the family time, the travel to get to each other, the joy that you have when you're picking out something and you feel like, oh, I just found the perfect gift. Because it really is about giving, and giving of yourself, giving to people that are less fortunate, giving to family. And I think it's fun. I think it's special, and I just love it. So when I thought, if I'm going to do a show about the paranormal aspect of the season, who am I going to talk to? Who do I know that's the best storyteller that I've heard in some time? Who do I know who is just a little spooky with all the knowledge that goes with that? And that would be tonight's guest, who is the best storyteller I know. He is a great writer. He is a psychic. He is a metaphysician, which is something I think is very cool. His knowledge base is absolutely mind blowing. If I have a question about the paranormal, whether it's a case I'm working on, whether it's a weird experience that I'm having myself, whatever is going on, he's who I call. And what I really love is that if there's something going on with me and he gets word about it through his channels, then he'll reach out to me and say, don't worry, this is not what this is, it's that. Or, you know, whatever he's getting, he reaches out and lets me know. And he really is, and I don't use the word friend lightly. I have a lot of acquaintances. Friends are precious. And this guy is a good friend, and his name is Mark Fults. So let's bring him on. Hey,
Hey,
how are
how you
you?
doing? Oh, I
I'm
am
good.
fine, fat, and sassy.
Ha, you may be sassy, but I love your candles. They're perfectly
Oh, thank
placed.
you, thank you. I love them. They're
I love
fairy
them.
lights. So
What do you think of our
it's the
Santa that
perfect
Carl
place for
found?
the fairy.
Carl's Santa is spooky,
So,
isn't he?
how?
I said,
I'm
Carl's,
sorry, I couldn't hear you.
that's okay. Carl's Santa behind us.
Oh, okay. Hey, Santa.
I think he's so cool. I like him.
Bring a sack of goodies to everybody. Yeah.
That one doesn't look like he's going to have a lot of goodies.
No, he looks like
No,
Krampus.
that one's a little better. Not much, but better. But, you know, I really do think it's cool the knowledge base that you have. You're so you're so well versed in so many aspects of the paranormal. And
Well, thank you. I can't take credit for it, but thank you.
well, you had to do the work to get there.
Well, yeah, the training and stuff that I've had, is helped me as a technician. But a lot of it, like the things that I've experienced is just given me the gifts of going through everything I've gone through. And
Not all of it was a gift, but it turned out that way.
yeah, but it turned out to be good, so I can't begrudge it. And as a matter of fact, I wouldn't be me without all the disasters, because I mean, I've had my life has been like a plane crash a couple of times, so
Yeah.
um but it's okay, it's I've had very good things come out of it, and I think it just, everything you go through helps somebody else if you use it
Yes.
correctly.
Yeah.
Everyone's a story, and my story helps people sometimes, and then sometimes it scares people sometimes. And um, I think the best thing that's happened is I still have a sense of humor. I think if you can laugh, you can live. And because I've laughed through disasters, I mean, just disasters. And when I get to my cousin could tell when I've hit the bottom or something, I'll just I'll be hee hawing, not insanely, but that's just, I think, my mechanism. And
Yeah.
so I shake it off and keep going. I may be damaged from whatever happened, but you can't stop. You just have to keep moving. You have to be a moving target. And I've
That's
been a
true.
moving
And
target.
I think that's I think that's incredibly true. And I hadn't really thought of it that way. But um, we have all had our challenges. And my dad used to get really frustrated and tell me that because I would give people chances longer than I should. And he literally looked at me one day and said, "You are too old to be this damn naive." And I said, "I'm not naive. I just believe in giving people an opportunity to redeem themselves. And if they don't, then it's done."
Yeah,
But I have often found that it's a much better way to live.
it
And
is. I mean, I give people a lot of chances, but I also, at this age, because of some of the ways people are acting nowadays,
yes,
once they've crossed the line a couple of times, that's it. You know, if that's who they are, they're telling you who they are. And used
well,
to, I
when
would
they
just,
show you who they are, believe them.
yeah. And when I was
You know,
younger, I was taught that I was so stupid or whatever,
yeah.
that I didn't think I had the right or ability to say anything to anybody about anything. And now that I'm a crotchety old biddy,
Miracle we're
um,
the same age.
oh honey, I've been I've been dragged down the road a few times, and I'm embracing my crone era, because I do give people chances. I give everybody a chance,
Yeah.
but and if somebody's meant to be in your life, they're meant to be in your life. If they aren't, that's okay. But if they're people who do destructive things and want to hurt you just because they're hurt in their life, then that's a whole different kettle of fish. And I mean, I'm getting too old for some of that. So I've gotten to where I can, you know, um, cut a bitch, but excuse my
Yeah.
language, but
Yeah.
excuse me, but
You're so naughty.
I still get, hmm?
I said, "You're so naughty."
I give people, I'm so naughty. But I give people chances. I'm not going to let the people who do bad things in my life kill my naive way of looking at the world. I like to give people chances because you don't know what
Yeah.
somebody else is doing or what's going on in their life, and you don't know, if you don't give something a chance, you don't get a good outcome, that you could have missed because you're being egotistical or being a jerk, or you're being tired, or some you have
Yeah.
to You have to be open, but my system tells me, if it's somebody coming, pretty well, they'll tell me, what, and I don't allow that stuff in. Of course, I mean, I've had people in the last year, that had a good mechanism for hiding ulterior motives, and but it all revealed itself eventually, and
Yeah.
but it made me learn a lot again. I had to wake up and go, oh, this is a new game. These are people are playing games now,
Yes. You're very good at
and
discerning that.
well, yeah, but like, but this one got me a little. I've had several little experiences this year that actually were good for me. Now that I've been through it, because now I'm like, oh, now I've got a whole new set of questions to ask myself before I do things, and then going into, because the psychic thing for me is, it's my heart, my soul. It's very personal. You're dealing with other people and you're dealing with spirits, and but then when you get into group mentalities and people narcissistic intentions from people who are wanting to get something from you, but in a underhanded way kind of thing and all that. Um, you have to understand you have to, here's the spiritual part, but there's also the business part. And,
Right.
so when I have to deal with people, because I approach it like I'll bring the coloring book, you bring the crayons. And
Yeah.
I'm going to say that way, but I'm also not going to be abused. And because if I'm hurt or abused, then that's not doing any good for me or the spirits that I'm trying to help. So if somebody wants to waste my time, they can waste their time somewhere else.
Yeah.
But because I'm like, I've got some living to do. We got living to do. People gotta, there's it's like the TikTok, the clock is ticking. And so right now I'm at that stage where I've got to take everything I've got and solidify it and make it work. There is no there is no backup. There is no kind of thing. It's one of those parts in life, you gotta trust in everything that you've gone through and what's coming ahead of you. So it's so you can be open. You just have to not be a doormat, and you have to respect yourself enough not to let yourself be a doormat. It doesn't do anybody any good.
Well, it doesn't,
And we have a
because it
generation
doesn't
of people who are, well, I
used to
mean, there's
having
people,
doormats
there's a whole
around them.
generation of
Yeah.
people who seem to be stunted. Yeah, yeah. You know, uh, I think we've skipped a lot of people being able to be socialized, and people have been in their
Yes.
computers for the last 20, 30, 40 years, and they quit understanding how to deal with people, how to have conversations, how to have arguments that you can agree to disagree, or you know my way's the highway, kind of thing. And snowflakes too. I mean, it's kind of crazy how fragile people are that are in their 30s sometimes. And I'm like, you should have been building up the thick skin in your 20s, honey. you know
They didn't have to.
and I was they didn't have to. And some of the I had some very rough friends for a while, and it actually did me good because it they would put you through the mail. And right, I mean, very funny. They were always hysterical, but they were brutal and funny and brutal and mean sometimes. But I learned to, you learn when to be really have your feelings hurt and when not to, and people
Yes.
can't discern that anymore.
Well, even when they do start picking up on it, there's not the, well, I'm just going to deal with it and cope. It's the blow up and nobody's ever been so abused before. I mean, it's not like you just, there are jerks in this world and sometimes they get into your area and you have to deal with that, and you cannot deal with that by going into a meltdown and just screaming. You deal with that
Yeah.
in an assertive way, which is you can't do that. That's not allowed, and that's certainly not allowed in my bubble. And if that's what you're going to do, you're going to have to do it somewhere else. People don't remember how to do that anymore. It's all or
Yeah.
nothing. And,
No.
you have to have discernment.
Yeah. You have to have discernment. And when we were talking about the Victorian kind of thing, because my grandparents, I knew Victorians. I mean, my grandparents were Victorian and Edwardian. And they just didn't deal with anything emotional. Your feelings got hurt. That's just tough. Buckle up, buttercup, kind of thing.
Yes,
Or,
that was my
you know,
grandparents.
they had short lifespans in that era. And so, you didn't have time to be a child. You didn't have time to
Yes.
figure it out.
Well, on the
And
child part for
you either
sure. I mean,
succeeded
because they had to grow
in the
up.
box given to you or not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I had
And
no real childhood.
well, and I had two very different sets of grandparents. My mother's parents were very um, social and proper to an extent, and you know, kind of urbanly raised. And my dad's parents were very rural, and one family had 12 children and the other had 13, and they all had a trade, so they built each other's houses and they did plumbing and they made bricks and they used their, everybody had skill set to help. You had farmers and you had brick masons and people that actually made the brick and such. And then it was very interesting to watch how all of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff really very different family dynamics from each side. And
Yeah.
but it's funny because my grandma, who was from South Alabama and a newspaper publisher's child, um, was very baldy sometimes. I mean, she was my role model, but very irreverent at times, but also very proper when the time called for it. And so I learned that it was okay to be a little different. You didn't have to be, you know, this way all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how we got on this, but it's really fun. But I agree that that
Or
diversity.
popping in and popping out.
I feel like I'm popping in and popping out. So I put a message over there in our private chat that
You are.
okay. Well, let me try something here. We'll just okay. Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Well, I can hear you now.
I feel
When
like
you put the earbud in, I can hear. Yeah.
okay. Well, we will roll with this until Carl gives me a sign
It out a
about it.
little.
Oh, he said thumbs up, so
All
we're
right.
good.
All
But
right.
yeah, but I guess I went to the we went
Okay.
to the grandparents as a part of like some Victorian
Well,
Edwardian
most
type
parents,
thing.
yeah.
I feel like I'm lagging.
We're having quiet.
I
Well,
guess maybe it's because we're doing
it's
spooky
coming out a
stories.
little bit. It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Probably.
Well,
It's yeah. I've had all sorts of weird things last couple of days.
well, and we know that when you do shows about
But
true paranormal stuff, the
my
paranormal shows
mother's
up.
parents were Victorian. Oh yeah, something always because it's electronic, so or it's frequency, so it messes with. I mean, yesterday I was in my cousin's truck and had my phone in my pocket, and she has Bluetooth on her in her truck, and she's getting a
Right.
call. My phone is in my pocket. I was so it's been a weird couple of days.
Well, and I think the energy is very weird too right now. So it's
Yeah.
been kind of weird for a while.
Well, everyone is. Yeah, and it's a harder Christmas for people right now, and they're worried about prices and they're worried about things, and that's when. And to next year, we're going. It'll be 50 years since the bicentennial, and when we did the bicentennial, we did the good old days thing because everyone was having the energy crunches and standing in line for 3 and 4 hours to get gas and hamburger, and all the food went out astronomical, um and we just went into good old the good old days kind of thing, and which I adored. And we had a fireplace. My mother cooked on that for a while, and we did our homework by oil lamp, and it was I loved it. It was really my thing. At
That
14
would be
years
your
old, I
thing.
was I was an old kid. It was my
Yeah.
thing. And next year is the 50th anniversary of that. So um we're kind of going back into that. So it's a good thing for people to put down their electronics and start sewing and look at how people did things and how they did things, and go back a little bit. It was the best year of my life as a child. I enjoyed it. I really felt that was the first time I could really tell I was an old reincarnated from something, because I really it hit all the for me, and started a create for me. So
Yeah.
in Christmas, everybody worries about what I can't buy. Well, if you can't buy it, make it.
Yeah.
Or you
Yes.
know, when my mother was a little girl, and they had 10 kids in the depression, and actually my grandparents said that was my granny said that was the best time for them, because they lived on a farm. They grew their own food. She made the clothes
Yeah.
for the kids. They never went without food. um but at Christmas there wasn't gifts. So what they had is they would have their stockings, and they would get an orange and some hard candy, and that was Christmas. And then they had all sorts of kids to play with, so they just
Yeah.
they made what they could out of what they had. And it's not about what you buy, it's about what you intend and what you want to give or what you want to think. And um so this is the time not to worry about if you haven't got money to buy something, make something. do something, or just visit.
Just show up.
My thing is I love to just show up and talk and have conversation and a little bit of good food. And when I was young, my parents had beautiful trees and with covered with light. I mean, it was just coming into when really people were doing the blinking lights and the colored lights on the inside
Yes.
trees. And I would just sit and just watch the lights on the ceiling. I just adored it. And Christmas was a time. My family run it for me all the time. Um, you would have to get in there, do dinner, and get out of the way because somebody would have a fight or show themselves. And so
Yeah.
you always knew that that was coming. So you had to enjoy it really quick and hope that, because for me as a child, Christmas was a big deal. And
Yeah.
because I had to spend I was very isolated uh, in my family. So I had to entertain myself. So Christmas was the time, here's something I can work with. But but I always would go, the stories my mother would tell about when they were young and all the children together and all the fun things they did. And I would think, and then also, Little House on the Prairie came out. And
Yes. I
I was
love
like,
that.
wouldn't it that's just a mom and a pa and just you're poor, but you just are having a good time. But we're not talking metaphysics very much, so we need to get into metaphysics. But
Well,
let's all sit here and
that's
talk about
well, I
or
was
ghost
very
stories
different.
or
Yes. But I was an only child and an only grandchild for 7 years with those two different, very different sets of family. And I loved both sides, the proper and making a roast or whatever, or a hen, depending on
yeah.
or, just one was 57,000 cousins and one was me and the grown-ups. I like that one too. But, it's really interesting because I think that the diversification of of income and family experiences and just life experiences that created what we find with needing entertainment, maybe
Yeah.
back in the day, and the fascination with the memorabilia. The How do you say it?
uh,
What Till had?
uh I'm not sure which thing.
Memento.
Memento Mori. You mean
Thank you.
the dead people
The
art?
death.
The dead people
Yes.
art?
The hair and stuff.
Yeah. Memento Mori.
And the
Yeah.
first time I was probably 40 years old or older, the first time I was exposed to that. And that was through my friend Mary Mylan, who is, Bloody Mary of New Orleans. And I had no idea. I mean, I had read it and I had, come across it here or there, but I didn't know much about it. And so I walked into this house and it was all the way down the walls. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, what is that? She's like, oh, well, it's, made from the dead's hair. And, it's how they remembered and kept their loved ones with them. And,
Yeah.
you know, and so I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Oh, look at the time, you know, but it wasn't that bad because I really like her and I trusted her to a degree. I didn't know her very well yet. But it was really fascinating
Sure.
to see something of that nature when you had never been exposed to it. And the Victorian era is, I believe, where that began. Am I right?
Well, it really began a little bit before that. I mean, people have always kept mementos of the dead, but in the Victorian era, it became solidified. I mean, it became a cottage industry.
Okay.
We have a mutual friend, Teal Gray, who just was selling off hers,
Yeah.
Memento Mori set. Um,
Which was quite a
and it was,
collection.
when it started off, it was quite a collection. Um, but it's also, she's having to change her life right now, and that's, sometimes you don't need that kind of heavy stuff in your life if you're having, when you're changing. And
Yes.
uh and it also, it goes on to someone else. And the first exposure I had to it is my mother's mother, who was her parents were Victorian, and they experienced a lot of death. So when someone died, they took photographs of them,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
photographs were very new. And before that, if you didn't have a painting of the person, you sometimes didn't remember them by except your memory. And then when photographs came in, photographed the days because it was so expensive. That was the only evidence they had of them, of what they look like. And then, but I know in these, like the Marie Antoinette times, there was a woman who was famous. She would take braids of hair from complicated, she would weave them into her hairdos, from the Marie Antoinette period. And she had like 40 relatives' hair, stuck in her hair. Um,
Oh, that's interesting.
so, but then they began to take care and made beautiful jewelry and beautiful brooches and cufflinks and earrings and they did the photographs, they did the paintings, they did uh, little memorial things you would hang on the walls. They made dolls. I actually have a doll that is a post-mortem doll, which is if your child died, then they would take a wax doll, and if you had real money, then it would be a fancy wax doll. They would shape it to look like the child's face. They would take that before they closed the casket. They would take the eyebrows and the hair of the dead child or deceased child and put it into the wax doll. And I have one of those, and she is incredibly haunted, but beautifully so.
Right.
She's very scary looking to a lot of people, but the mother had lost the little girl. Her name was Lizzie Brown. They called her Elizabeth Brown, but they called her Lizzie, and she died when she was 9 months old. Well, they did the doll with the child's hair, and what they did with the wax doll, they put plaster in the inside the head, so the head would have weight, and the mothers would use the dolls as a mourning tool. They still felt like they had something they could put their love into or grief into. And this doll took on the consciousness the mother put into it of love and being held. And so when I have a doll in the Live and Let Live where I worked at the time, I
Right.
brought my doll collection down there, and the doll, it had these real pale gray eyes, and if it saw somebody that was, especially a female who was crying or suffering or had lost a child or was or in distress, and the doll felt like it wanted to soothe that because that doll would take the pain away from the mother. And so the doll would start shaking and the eyes turned cobalt blue. And there were quite a few people um, that would hold the doll and feel better. And then the doll, when it would shut down, the eyes would turn back to being gray. And I have her. Actually, I'm going to have her in my show coming up. My cooking show. I'm going to have all my haunted dolls in that. But it was a memento mori, I mean, and some people, there were a lot of them around, and then people started freaking out about it in the 60s and 70s. And
Yeah.
if they inherited those, they would bury them or destroy them. And this one is very sweetly haunted. So, to me, it's like you become very protective of it as a child. And I've had people offer me money for it. I'm like, I'm not selling my child. You can forget. I don't know what
No,
you do with it. Anyway,
exactly.
it's like I'm not. I've seen what ghost hunters do sometimes, and it's not going to happen. And but she's like, they're very, very, very rare now. And but the pictures my grandparents took or had taken, their first child was born. He was like a 12-pound baby almost, but the doctor didn't tie the umbilical cord good enough, and he bled to death in the crib.
Oh,
And they took a picture. I'm sorry to tell that story, but
that's
they
okay.
took a picture of the baby, and I have the picture somewhere, because that's all they had before they buried him. Um, my uncle, who was killed in 1950, they took pictures of him in the coffin, and so I saw that a lot when I was little, and
Yeah.
you have kind of the modern eye is like that's weird, that's terrible, but if you understand that that's um for some people that means a lot, that's something that they cling to. And it's not, to them it may not be warped, to us it's warped. um but I understand it. And my mother even wanted me to take pictures of her sister, before she was buried. And I was like, oh, well, I don't think we can do that. But that was norm. I mean, there were studios all over the place set up to do that. And to make the hair and um, make the special clothing that you could be buried in. To the houses were set up with the parlor to be the showroom, where you had
Yeah.
the living room where the
Yeah.
people would be, the parlor, you would meet people in the parlor, but you had would be put in the bed into the parlor. And they
Yeah.
sometimes had the carrying out door built into the Victorian that you didn't, the thing of the sin eater, the people didn't want the ghosts to take them out the same door you brought them. You took them in one door, took them out another door. You didn't,
Yep.
that way the spirit couldn't
Now I'm losing you some.
find your home,
There you are. Yes.
follow you, and the kind of thing. The sin would come. They would the body the parlor door and set the cat. Ah, and and set the casket on, like, sawhorses, and the senator would come up, and then they would pay him, and he would eat the food that was set on the corpse, and then after it was finished, he would take the spirit with him so it wouldn't haunt the family, and also to eat the sin so they could go to heaven, and he would take on their sin. And the Victorians were intense about death, and Queen Victoria, kind of, because she was in mourning for decades, it became
Yes, you're right.
fashionable. And even with little girls, um, they had, the China dolls mourning sets for the little girls where it had the funerals, and it would have the casket, and you would have, and the doll would have all the dresses, and the little girl would learn all of the processes, because they had, you had your full mourning for like a year or whatever,
Right.
and then you could start to wear other types of clothing after a certain time, or and what was proper. So as little girls, they had teaching sets, basically doll sets, and they would play funerals to learn the processes they would have to use as a grown woman. And so it was serious business, And two, before funeral homes, if when they started embalming in the 1860s, before there were funeral homes, what you would do is, if you had them embalmed, they would come to your home and do it. And they would, and the family would clean off the dining room table, and you'd put the person out. The women would clean the bodies, the men would build the boxes, build the coffins, and you didn't just hand them off to somebody, but if they were embalmed, they would come and do that, set up the procedure, do it. But everything, the men would build the caskets, or have the caskets already. A lot of times people just built caskets
Yeah.
and had them in the barn, or in they were real practical. A lot more practical than we are. Um, because now we spend $10,000 on a tin box that really isn't going to keep you good anyway. Uh, and we spend a fortune to be pickled, which it's only meant to get you through viewing. And
Yes.
they would make the boxes. You can actually take a wooden casket to a funeral home and say, I want this, as long as it's decent. I mean, there have been people buried in those felt covered boxes that they use for carrying people or shipping them. Um, but you can supply, I believe, that's what I've been told, that if you supply a wooden casket, they have to use it. And you don't
Really?
have to be embalmed. But if you're embalmed, it's better, if you're going to be buried in a wooden box, not to be embalmed, because then
Yeah.
that way it doesn't seep into the water table and all that. So, but they were practical. They would build the caskets, they'd keep them. They knew death was at their door all the time, because people, if you made it to 30 years old, you were kind of old. Um,
Yeah.
when we used to go looking at old cemeteries, they would be filled with babies and
I know, right?
mothers who didn't make it through childbirth, let alone, um, and so many children, when they would get polio, smallpox, um, tuberculosis, or all those terrible, terrible diseases that were going around, or something simple could kill you. I
Yes.
mean, Urte's partner, before antibiotics, he scratched himself with on a rose, and he got infected and he died of blood poisoning because they didn't
Yeah.
have antibiotics. So you could scratch yourself and die. You could have things that they didn't have really good things to put you to sleep with. You could die from stress. The Victorians at least quit doing the bleeding that people thought was a
Yes.
good thing. Um,
Never was.
which I just really, it's so hard for me to think how stupid that was, but that's all they knew what to do. But the ones that they called witches, which were the mountain
The
women,
healers.
knew
Yeah.
you don't take their blood away. You give them tea and tinctures, and you make poultices, and you make soups, and you keep them warm, and you don't bleed them.
No.
And the men doctors came along, and tons of people died that didn't need to die, but they thought that was because the man said they didn't, and they got rid of all the midwives and women who could do those kind of things. And but they were fascinated with death because death was their companion. They weren't afraid of death like we are. And even if they were, I think the ghost storytelling, that was their way with death, because everyone that's alive right now will be dead some point. um Anything that
Yes.
lives dies. And the whole thing that they would do, in Europe, all of the tombstones that have the skulls and the caskets and the death symbols, it's like, as you are now, this is how you'll end
Yes.
up, because we all die.
That was
Um,
something that was
and
something that
in
I
a
found when I was
way,
in
now we're
Scotland.
so afraid of it.
There was a lot of that in
Yeah.
the Greyfriars Kirk. Um, they had a tremendous amount of mi- the the signage, like on the gates into the different
Mhm.
abbots' tombs and things of that nature. That was probably one of the more interesting
Yeah.
things that I saw. And Sue in chat said that the average lifespan was also highly impacted by the high death rate among children. So if you made it to adulthood, you had a half
Yeah.
decent chance of living to old age if you didn't die in a war, plague, or something.
Or something.
Uh,
You know,
Or
I mean,
something.
a bad tooth can a bad tooth can
Yes.
poison your heart. You can die from a
Yeah.
bad tooth. And think about how horrible it was back then. You know, I mean, I
Yeah.
was raised, my father loved to pull teeth, and whether your teeth were ready or not, sometimes. And actually, when he got in his 60s, which he was my age, and he was huge, he was like 6'4", and he had teeth that looked like the carved signs that they used to hang outside of dentists, and he pulled his own wisdom teeth with the roots intact and kept them in his cabinet. And when he died, I was wanting to get them and have them, bronzed or gold, and my mother had thrown them away. And I was like, those were, but he would pull them. He had a thing about doing it. And I thought, oh my God, in those days, if you had an abscess or something and somebody pulled that, without no painkiller, no antibiotics, you could die from being septic. You could get any kind of infection. And um so their life was, you were just a hair's breadth away from death. And due to my own near death experiences, I know that, you can be going along, tra la 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 la, and in 2 seconds, it happens, and you're dead or dying, or worse. There's a lot worse things than dying. And one of them is, to me, would be, being laid up and being a vegetable, or not being able to communicate but still thinking. But they were just so practical. And my
I think that
grandmother.
that would
Oh,
be.
go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think that to me, people always, oh, a fate worse than death. But I do think that absolutely, if you are still cognizant but immobilized, if they
Yeah.
don't know, you know, that would be absolutely to me the most hideous torture. And we've got
Horrible.
some comments in here too that I wanted to share with you. I know that we're kind of lagging between each other right now.
Sure.
I'm not sure what it is, but
Sure. But you
wanted to say
read me whatever, because I can't see them. I have glasses on.
okay, I've got
It's
it.
not showing up on my side, so I can't read it. All right.
Well, let me share with you. But we've had Melinda Zabe join us in chat, who I just love, as well as Raymond. And Melinda says we're taught to fear death, but death should not be scary. And that's something I feel too. But yet I feel like that, but I still have hesitation about I'm not going to go seek it. But I wanted to say too, you know, that Sue brought back, he's the one that talked about the average lifespan and such, but he said later, surviving to 25 often meant an expectation of reaching about 50, with many living much longer. Old age was not unusual once you get to that point. But and because we are having a
Yeah.
lag going on, when I want to say something, I'm just going to do that or something of that nature.
Okay.
But because I do love the information that you're sharing. You know me, I can learn from you all day long. But I think that with Melinda, when she says, because Melinda is listening to us from a hospital bed. So I told her I was glad she was here, but hated that she was there. So we are taught by a lot of people are taught to fear death and find it just
Yes.
terrifying. And I don't know. I don't know that I fear death. I fear dying. I don't want to, the pain and, because oftentimes there is
The
that.
process.
I don't, the process to me is scary. And Sue is also sharing an article with some shorts that goes deep into the topic in chat. So I will copy that and save it into, if I can, I will copy that and save it into the show online too. But why do you think? I mean, there's so many different reasons I feel to fear death if you are somebody who does. But why do you think that fear is so powerful? I mean, because if you before there was an opportunity, I don't know. I mean, it's just a continuation. I feel like it's a continuation into the next.
When I, of course, into the next, or back into, I mean, it's my death experiences. It was very terrifying up to, because of course I think the Victorians had it right, where it's like, it's just a part of life. It's nothing, you can't do anything about death. You
Hmm.
have to accept it. So why let it be your enemy? It's not it steals our most, beautiful flowers sometimes, but it's not our enemy. And um the first time when I died, 33 years ago, I didn't know what to expect. And I was in incredible amounts of pain because everything was shutting down. All of my organs from my sternum down were knocked loose, and it was just like a twisting rope of pain. And two, it didn't help that I had people causing me a lot of grief while I was trying to die, and but I can tell you, when the process starts, and any hospice nurse will tell you, when people start seeing dead
Yeah.
people and all that, it's the beginning of the process. And you get so fascinated with what's happening and what the people are doing that are coming towards you and calling your name, and you feel so good. You get like a very big dose of oxytocin. So it's wonderful. But what people are going to see is they're going to see the body. The body has got to go through what the body does is different than what the spirit and the soul are doing. And the spirit and the soul will get out of the body before the body dies. And there's a process. And if you follow the process, your spirit and your soul, your mind, it's all uploaded, downloaded out of there. The dying part stinks. Um, the dying process of the downloading was so amazing and fabulous. And the body's doing its thing, it's dying, but over here to the left, and you're feeling great going forward with all these people and going into the tunnel and going into the lights, and it's for me, it's like I used to be when I was little, I used to be very afraid of being buried alive. And I think I came from a past life thing or something. Or, but um, after that, I'm not afraid of dying. Of course, I'm not a fan of suffering. Uh, for myself, I'm not scared of it. But, um, but you still have to mourn your life, so you can cry and you can be sad, and because that's what you don't know, it's the unknown. But once you go into it, you realize it's not something unknown to you, because you came from somewhere to here before you went there. This is we're like little interneurons that come
Yeah.
from the other side, is like a big brain, and we're like little neurons with a little cord on it. And we come out into life, we learn, we record, and when you die, you go right back. And then when you go in there, the first thing I was asked was like, what did you learn? And apparently at that time I hadn't learned enough, so here I am. And then when I came back, it stunk coming back into the body. Um,
We have some
because my
comments I
body
want to
was
share.
still in. Oh, okay.
Well,
Go ahead.
and I find these interesting. I think you will too, because we have great listeners. I am just enjoying this because but and Sue shared a long article with us that's going to be in chat. I said, and Melinda had a comment, and then Sue has a couple behind it. But Melinda said the pain and suffering is not worth the fight. Death is a blessing for many of her patients, and she's watched them go from pain and suffering to pure bliss and release of the pain and illness. Their souls and spirit lift and leave that shell that's the body. And what I haven't said is
Yeah.
that I was present with both of my parents at their death. And one, I mean, they both were healthy until they weren't. And what happened was that the brain was having problems and the body was still going. And so the
Yeah.
it was very difficult for both of them because it just was. It was I wasn't anticipating being that person in either case. And I was in both. And one of them knew what was happening and was okay. And the other one was really pissed off at me. And I was like, there wasn't anything else I could do. You know, I've, and then Sue said that we are greatly impacted by the trauma of the Black Death in Europe, where scary, huge numbers of people died without treatment. It's high, like 30 to 90%, often 50 to 70. Modern medicine makes a big difference. So the outlook is, I'm assuming, Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying that the outlook now is different, or should be, but that because I know, like through the Crimean War and stuff, that was huge, as well as just spreading all over Europe. But it's there's so much that affects the outlook that we as a society have on death. And I have friends who are, I'm probably going to say this wrong, death doulas or doulas. And one of them told me that, although I was reluctant, it's what I turned out to be. And I was like, well, I don't know. I'm not going to go and volunteer for that duty if I don't have to, because maybe because it was my parents that made it tougher, as opposed to had it been people that I was just there as support for and for their families. Maybe I could do it in that instance. It would probably be much different. But I mean, this is a lot different than I anticipated the show being, but I think it's really important. And maybe we'll do the second half with some of the stories, but I feel like this is something that you and I can talk about it and have, right? But it's not something that the average show is doing. And, it's so hard because, we lost my nephew in a car accident. And that was the suddenness of that. And, that was such a different thing than watching people who have lived their life.
Yeah.
And, my mom had Alzheimer's. My dad just had strokes that began to limit minor strokes, but that were affecting his speech and strength and such as that. But, so they took a while, but my nephew was a phone call and gone. And I don't think I would, and I actually wound up involved in the after of that with my sister, but it wasn't something that was very easy either, because I was support for her.
It's not very easy.
It's just really a terrible, it's a terrible thing when it's a child in your family, but with people who have lived their life, and granted, there's the argument that he had lived his life and done what he was supposed to do, but it's hard to accept that when it's a child of your family. But with grown-ups, it's much easier to cope with.
When they're young, you don't expect it.
No.
Yeah. Well, what you don't expect it when it's the young, and even with the old, I mean, we're so, as a civilization, separated from death. My mother, who made who sat with many people who died, um, I thought she would have a better concept of, it's okay to die. And when it came her time, she was absolutely petrified. And I said, "Well, Mama, you sat, my first death experience, my family came, looked at me, and left. Some of them, not all of them. And they didn't want to be around it. They didn't want to see me die. They didn't, but my experience, because I think it's very important if you can, when somebody dies, it's good for them to, if they want company, to let them have company, because, they're going into the unknown. They don't remember it. They don't understand what it is. And so after I spent my first one being alone, then the second time when I was dying, I told my mother, come and sit. We got things to talk with, and da da da. And she got to see and experience some spiritual stuff. I mean, the guide that was sitting around me, the blonde-haired lady, my mother saw her, and she wasn't a believer and all that. She was fascinated by ghosts, but she didn't know how to comprehend it. And she would go, "Well, that was an angel," and I went, "Well, that, but I knew who it was." And but when she was dying, she was scared until her sister's ghost came and were visiting with her, and she asked them if it was painful to die, and they went no, because it really isn't. Once you start dying and separating, it's not painful, because the spirit, you don't have a body to feel with anymore. So she quit being afraid. And but at my experience of dying alone, when I was dying the first time, then I make sure to go and be with people if I can, if they're dying. Even people who treated me fairly cruelly. I've
Yeah.
sat with people who really couldn't stand me, but I was there for them, and actually fed them their last meals and made sure they were okay, made sure they understood it was all right to go on, and there was, I was there to be a support. And I, even with, I'm fine, I mean, when it's my time, it's just going to be my time. I've gotten to have 33 years so far that I wouldn't have had.
Yes,
So,
you
and it has to end sometime, and the practical thing. Do I want to die? Not really, but am I going to begrudge it? Oh, no, 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 no. It was so good. And and the experience I had expanded my psychic abilities, and I understand the consciousness better. So, no, I'm not going to be afraid. Now, where I have problems is my pets. I can know a
Yes.
person,
Oh,
I've known people I've known 50, 60 years now, that you're kind of like, oh, whatever, I don't know, because they were jerks or whatever. And I I go to pieces over my animals. And I've even had spirits of my animals show up, and I
yes.
know they're okay. It's just that that's the one area for me that it is so hard to let go of my pets. But I know,
Well,
but believe me, when you die, on the other side, I've known people who've had them, meet them, because my cousin's husband, he didn't like people. And they had a dog named Higgin and Harold who'd gone on. And every time he would start to, he died multiple times, near death. And each time he'd come back, he'd say, I would see this fence. I'd see a fence. They
oh,
had a split rail fence on a place they used to live. And he said they would be on the other side of the gate fence trying to get him to come through the gate. So when he died, that's who met him, was the dogs, because he didn't like people.
I think
And
that's so
so,
amazing.
but I go to people. It's very sweet,
And
and animals, spirits. I mean, the Indians. Some of the Indians go. You're jet. You're met first by the animals that you met in life. Um, who judge you. Were you an okay person? And but I connect more with the
I do
animals
know
than I
that.
do the people. But I've made it a point to go and be with people who are dying so that they wouldn't feel alone. It's
Yes.
not an easy experience sometimes, um but it's an important one. I think, I mean, it's birth and death are our most important experiences. And the birth you don't have very much control over. The death you don't have a lot of control over. um
Yeah.
but we are taught to fear death so badly. And not that you should just go put your arms out and embrace it, but when it's my next time, I'm not going to be shy about it because it was great. um and there were there like I said, I think before I mean, when I was 3 and 4, I had memories of where I was before I was
Yeah.
born. And when I would tell my mother that stuff, she would go shh. And so it's just a cycle. The earth, the consciousness does waste nothing. So we're just here to learn and develop, and it's like playing a game. And
Okay.
you
I
die,
have
they
stuff
kind
to
of go,
share
what
with
did
you.
you learn? Did you get what you need to out of it? Okay,
Okay.
go ahead.
This is kind of working out, but now Melinda is sharing again, and this is relevant to the pet side of things. Okay. And Sue has some comments too. But Melinda says, I am a licensed vet tech and wouldn't
Sure.
deny my patients death so that their physical body could exist on this plane in pain and suffering for the sake of someone who cannot let go. Their animals tell us in no uncertain times when it's time. And relevant to that,
Oh, yeah.
um, relevant to that, she says, and I'm going to jump Sue's comment and come back to it. But she says, of course, we want them with us, but sometimes we have to do the right thing by them as they do by us. And she says, I see my animals all the time. They're always with me. And I don't see mine all the time anymore, but I
Oh,
have
yeah.
I have seen my first rescue that needed me is I mean, she needed us and came to us, and I physically saw her in my house, but instead of being she was a solid white dog, she was gray when I saw her. And she was just coming down the hall and dig the dog leg into the kitchen. I was like, "Oh, well, hi, Willow." You know, and I have felt other dogs that we have lost here, and I know that my dogs see them because the two dogs I have now are neurotic. So, and the one that we lost last was the best friend of one of the ones who's here. Um, and he died suddenly. We took him to the vet to be checked out while Tipper and I went for a walk, and I got a call at the on the walk that he had died. So Tipper and I went and met David at the vet, and I made sure that Tipper saw him so that he would know that we hadn't abandoned him
Yeah.
there because Tipper had abandonment issues. And now we have the great big one that's like 2 times at least the size of the other one that's here. And they see things all the time. And I know that. But it's really, I don't see humans, but I do see animals. And I find that interesting because I like animals better than I like
Yeah.
most humans anyway. But and Sue says, yes, medicine, that's true. But yes, modern medicine, antibiotics, etc., help people survive along with other public health measures, pest control. Go to any cemetery and you can see how many children died before we had vaccination for childhood diseases. And I have always, especially the old cemeteries, like in the area where my grandparents grew up, which is where one of
Yep.
the children live now. So, yeah, I was going down the road taking the boys somewhere this summer, and I looked up, and the road that we were turning onto was named after my granddad. I had no idea that road was there. So that was fun. But, it's, to me, it's really an interesting thing. But maybe we should move on since we build this as Christmas, you know, Christmas haunting stories.
Well,
Maybe we should
we're
do
moving into death and Christmas
death and Christmas. Yeah.
because in the Victorian era and the ancient days, it's all intertwined,
Yes, it
and it's
is.
just become separate. In the last couple of centuries, it's where it's kind of separated because one of the best times I ever had when I was 13 years old. My mother had a fireplace in her home, and my sister-in-law and her two babies and my mother and I were at home, and my father had driven to the airport to get my brother who was in the army. And so we sat in front of the fire in the dark and told ghost stories. And my mother told her mother's stories, and my sister-in-law told hers, and I told whatever I had hiding in my back pocket. And it was it was so exciting. And because the stories that my mother told, which her mother would tell, which were Victorian stories for the most part, they're so dramatic and melodramatic,
Yes,
and
they are.
put the chill on you, and it was exciting. And I thought, well, before movie theaters and before radio and before TV, this was entertainment, but it
Yeah.
also, we have the fascination of life continuing after death. But the way that the Victorians looked at it, with death, until the spiritualist movement came, and then it was a different concept, because then it became a religion, basically developing a religion around spirits and talking to spirits in the other world, and the other world wasn't so far from us. And there's an element which we have now. We love to watch scary ghost stories. We want to be
No,
afraid. We
no.
want, because that is the big fear for some people, is the great unknown. And so when we put those stories in front of the fire, it solidified it for me. I went, I want to be a storyteller. I want to write ghost stories. I want to collect ghost stories, because I was a weird little nerdy ghoul. I was just fascinated with metaphysical stuff. It, and there's nobody in my family who was like me like that. And but I was fascinated with it. And the Victorians were professionals at it. They were professional at putting it all together, getting you buried, the what you had to do to get there, and and what you did afterwards, and all, what to cook, what to wear, how to do. But they also were, I think, the best at telling ghost stories. And
Oh
Christmas
yeah.
time we think of it like cheery cheeked little Santa and all that, and that's a part of it. But you know, there's nothing better to sit around a fire in the cold and the dark telling a ghost story while you're warm and sitting there, fascinated. And
Yeah.
it's no different than our ancient tribes where they would sit and everything before everything could be written, things were done through storytelling. So, and the stories I was told, I remember, I was 13. I've remembered them, all this time, 50
Yeah.
years. And they impressed me. And I thought, well, that's what happened in the old days. That was the fascination. So actually, Sin Schrader Hill and I are doing a Christmas ghost book, but it's stories we've written, and I've written several. One is called My Mother's Ghost, and one is called Violence in the Snow. And they're very, very Victorian, the way that they have a little twist.
Oh,
The Victorians were so good at presenting. They knew it was like embroidering. It
yes.
you didn't just say it. You told it.
Yes.
You told it in a way that it lit up your imagination. But it was like embroidery. Instead of using a sewing machine, not a straight stitch. And they always just had a beautiful floral way of dealing with things. And so I got really fascinated with that. So we are creating a Christmas Victorian horror stories. So of course, they're going to be, you know, fiction, but some of them are really. There's one I really just absolutely love so far, and
Only one?
that because that's kind of my age thing, because I mean when I do art nouveau. I'm an old reincarnated frustrated art nouveau artist. So uh but and two, with Christmas, in the Victorian era, Christmas was dangerous. The houses were dangerous. They would put candles on trees, and the trees would catch fire. The the wallpapers had arsenic in them sometimes. The fabrics, they even put green arsenic as dye in candies.
I did
They
not know that.
had toys and things. If you got a Yes. Oh, yeah. They would use it as an edible arsenic, but it was not, it was poison. It was, but it made a beautiful green and beautiful reds. There were other colors besides green, but the green is the most obvious one. But there were other colors of arsenic. And there would be lead and arsenic in the paints that the toys were painted with sometimes. They would be in the clothing and the fabrics. Um, so a lot of people just died from at Christmas time because of fires or lead intake or lead poisoning, or there would be just disasters. And the Victorians were into morbid stories. There are stories that I read as a child that I can't even tell now. I think they're just so disturbing. And they thought they were kind of beautiful in their tragedy. And like we were talking
Something
before
makes
we
you
started,
uncomfortable?
there was a thing. Hmm? Say it
Something
again.
made you uncomfortable? I
Oh
find it hard
yeah,
to
there's quite
listen.
a few things that make me uncomfortable. I
That's
mean, they
surprising.
were terrible stories. Like, a little girl looking at the chimney looking for Santa and getting caught on fire and burning to death.
Oh, yeah.
And that being told as, a warning to children, don't, because it was a danger because kids thought, well, Santa's going to come down the chimney. So they would tell horrible stories to keep you from, as a child, from getting excited and looking up the chimney and catching your dress on fire. Um, because that would happen. So they had horrible stories that would teach you, well, you need to not get so close to the fire. You don't need to get close to the lit. You don't need to leave the Christmas tree candles burning, which I'm sure they were beautiful to look at, but or um, you know, they nothing was by accident in it. They knew those things were poisonous, but people wanted them. And there were people who would wear the green clothing and stuff like that and go, they knew that, how to, uh, they wore so many layers of clothing. Sometimes I think they didn't get as much of the arsenic in them or the poisons. I mean, they put poisonous stuff in everything. I mean, uh, we get products in these cheap stores we go to that come from China that they
Yes.
put lead
Yeah.
and they put fillers
All
and
kinds.
stuff that are not supposed to be there. And there are candies that have antifreeze in them, um, and those get by the food,
Yeah.
administration, FDA. So, we could people still poison everything we touch. We're still, we don't, it's all about profit. And back then it was all about profit. It didn't care. Well, if the child died, you'll have another one, you know,
Everything
if,
else is new
you know,
again.
but their prospect was, well, somebody dies, when women were starting to do the radium and
Yeah.
doing the glow in the dark dials on things, and the girls to use brushes and dip the brushes in their mouth and to get a sharp tip, and they were getting radium poisoning, and it would eat their jaws away. So Christmas wasn't what we understand it as. I mean, children a lot of times were working. Little 3 and 4-year-old kids started, being trained to work. Um, they didn't have Christmas like we know it, particularly pleasant thing, and then again, for some children, even though they were poor, they had hope. Little kids, it
Yeah.
was pretty grim, and life was very grim. So they brought that grim into storytelling. I think is a way, if you could have, it would scare people, but also I think for some people, like now, we watch a scary movie, we go and experience it and walk away, and we had the
No,
experience without having to be murdered or scared.
I can't watch
I don't think
those. I do
that's,
not like slasher
and it's the
movies.
same thing, but they also, people, know, I know, and I love some ghost movies and stuff, but
Ghosts are okay.
um it's no different. People want to be scared, and but it also taught them lessons. It taught them, there is, and for some people, it was good for them to know that they wanted to think there's a life after it. Even though they may talk about it in church, a lot of people don't know until they get there what it
Right.
is. And So, but but the Victorians were professionals at it. They could tell a story, they could put the chill up your back. We were talking about Shmee, which is
Yes.
a great scary Victorian Christmas story. And all of these Victorian things that were gothic and these big mansions, and in actuality in those days, I mean, up until the First World War, people were big into playing games. And the
Yes.
Smee, I don't want to ruin the Shmee
No, go
story,
ahead.
but if you can find it, it's great. Well, I
Um,
mean, the concept of the story was, these people are having they're in a big mansion, and they're going to have like a little game, and the person who is it does not tell, and you have to figure out who the person is. So it's like, it's me, it's Shmee, you know but there's a guy that doesn't want to play the game. And this is like before the Second World War. I mean, First World War, excuse me.
right.
And so they get him to say why. And he told about he went to uh, a place, I think it was the same. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I read it. But I think it was the same kind of thing. He went, rich
It was a
people had
hiding
big
game.
mansions to go to,
Yeah.
and it's a hiding game, but you have to figure out which one in your group is she. So this guy explains he was at this party, and they were hiding, and he was with this older lady who was very eccentric, and they were hiding, and this girl was with them that they didn't remember seeing. He had seen her, but he didn't know who she was. And she he asked her name. She was very pretty, and they sat in the dark and talked. And then this older lady comes in and says, I broke away from everybody else, and they were sitting there talking, and she knew that scratched the girl's dress and said, "Oh, someone else is here," and they were talking and figuring, they were waiting for someone to come find them. And they were sitting there so long, and I said, "Well, nobody came to get us." But when they came in with the candle, and the woman was just freaked out. So the gentleman went with the man who owned the property, and they were chewing him out because they thought him and that older lady were, sitting there having a. He goes, "No, we were sitting there with this girl who had told him her name, and that's all she had said. He had asked her, and she'd said the name, and she was there very quietly. Told the owner the name of the girl. The girl's, but the girl had told him, and he said, "Oh, don't tell the women." He said, "Last year, and let's say the girl's name was Sally. Say, last year we were having the same game, and a girl got lost and fell down the steps and broke her neck, and her name was Sally." And so he said, "So I don't like to play games anymore, you know."
Yeah.
But the way they tell it and embroider it, it is fabulous. I didn't tell it right, but see, that's, but but if you read it, and incredibly, you're sitting there, when you get to the twist, you're like, ah. And the old nurse is an incredibly wonderful old 1820s, 1840s ghost story that
Mhm.
works. I'm like, it really needs to be a movie. Um, with a ghost child and a ghost woman. It's fabulous, you know. So look up the old nurse, look up Shmee, look up, um, you know, Christmas Carol is the most famous one, but there are tons of Christmas ghost stories that they would do because, you know, everyone wanted to jump on that bandwagon.
Well, at
And
the
if you
turn of
look
the
through
spring
old
is one.
newspapers, yeah, oh yeah, wonderful. And yeah,
I mean, they're
the movie The
much.
Innocents is a chilling movie, fabulous. My favorite. See, my things like on Halloween and Christmas time is to sit and curl and watch The Uninvited, um, The Innocents, The Haunting. Um, excellent, excellent ghost stories. The Changeling with George C. Scott scared
Yes.
the crap out of me when I was a kid. And it actually fascinated me because there's a psychic in it who does channeling. And that was the first time I'd seen someone channel. And I went, me. And I started channeling after that. You know, you've got to see me channel a little bit. And,
That was
but it
educational.
inspired me. I went, people do that. And, and it was actually so close to what actual channeling is that the changeling, even though it goes a little wonky, it goes, you know, I mean, it goes more modern ghost story because it does the exploding houses and things like that. But the ghost part of it is scary. It's a
Yeah.
great movie. The Uninvited is funny and scary at one time. You know, excellent. The Innocence is um incredible. I mean, it's put together so beautifully and so moody, and Deborah Carr is just you know, those big hoop skirts, you know, creeping through the house looking for ghosts. And I've seen ghosts in that had antebellum dresses on, which is a very interesting thing. You'll hear, I mean, there was one that I experienced. The first ghost I ever experienced as a haunted house was my grandmother's granny's house, the psychic, and I didn't know it was haunted. And I was having to watch my grandfather, and you know, you would hear the ghosts running up and down the halls and stuff like that, and you would hear it sounded like rustling leaves, and that was
Addresses.
taffeta petticoats. So when you would hear this, you would feel this cold air coming out of the hallway and just engulfing you, and you would hear the sounds of rustling leaves. You knew it was the female ghost. And when I saw her run through the house, she was real tiny, but she looked like a little silver silhouette, but she had a big skirt. And she would just make this rustling sound as she went through the house, checking the doors. And then after she would do her thing, and you would hear her going through drawers and things like she was packing. And then a male ghost would come into the house, and he was horrific. And so, you know, which there are funny stories like that. My grandmother, when they first moved in the house, was, you know, her room was ghost central. The ghost would come in there all the time, looking around at stuff like she was hurrying, trying to get out of there. And then the male ghost would come down the hallway, and it would get weirder. And so she was not telling my grandfather. And one day they were sitting at the table, and the man ghost comes through the door, past my grandfather into the hall, and he goes, "Who the hell is that?" And she had to tell him. And so they didn't tell me it was haunted. And then when we were going, asked them about the ghost, because I had the crap scared out of me. And he goes, "Oh yeah, we don't bother them; they don't bother us." And but the male ghost really didn't like me, and so it was really, you know, from the end of the hallway where my grandmother's room was. She after she died, it kicked up a lot, and you would hear, and so I picked up the phone to go. Well, I think it's time to call mom. And I picked up the phone and it was on the phone from the extension in her bedroom going, "Ah." And I waited for a while and it quit. And I called my mother and they came down. And when they got there, you could hear somebody, this real high pitched little voice in the other rooms talking to my grandfather. He was asleep. And but the adults after that would go, "Oh yeah, we're scared of the basement," and all this, and they would tell all their stories about it, and I'd never heard about it, and it was fascinating. But I wasn't prepared at that age for it, and now it's like I would chase it around, going, figuring it out. My grandmother, who was incredibly psychic, said what she felt was that the man was going to kill the woman and the woman killed him and she buried him in the basement. And the
Oh,
basement
okay.
was really haunted. Uh, my cousin Ellen, when she was young, her mother died and they took her in for a little while. And my grandfather thought he was being real sweet, and he built her an art room in this haunted room in the basement where the ghosts would come from. It would always start at the end of the hallway. It would come up from the basement, come up the hallway, and then go out in the house. You'd see them running out of the hallway, doing whatever. And she didn't know it was haunted, but she knew it was scary. And so she would act like she would go down there to paint, and she would go sit down on the front step or something, and then go in and act like, "Thanks, Grant." She didn't want to tell him, "I don't want to go in that dang room," and because everybody was scared of the basement. And the I got to see it when I was 6, because that room had little lace curtains, and I was when we would go visit my granny and pappy. I would have to be out in the yard tootling, and I went past the back window, and this dead person who had their skin was just like gray leather, and their eyes were gooey black, and they were as dead as you can get, and their hair was sticking up straight, broken off, and they just came up to the window to look at me. And then when they saw I could see them, they backed off, and I went, at 6 years old, I didn't know. I knew it was scary, and I knew
Yeah.
my mother wouldn't believe me if I told her, so I stayed away from that window. Well, they tore the house down. That was in the 70s, when I had my experience, and they sold the house after my grandparents died. And this people who really, really wanted it, they got in there, and the lady was scrubbing the floor in the hallway and looked up, and this man was standing there, and which was the ghost. So they moved. Uh, I had a friend whose sister ended up renting the house, and they said you'd hear banging up and down the hallway walls. And then one night they came in, they were nurses. And so they came in one night, 2 o'clock in the morning, and they were looking at their mail. And usually everything would happen on Saturday night. And they were sitting there. One of them was facing the hallway where everything would come from, and the other one had her back to it. And the other one said this man who looked like a gray photograph with a fedora hat, or with a hat on, came out of the hallway and stood behind the other girl, and they moved out the next day. And then the sister that I knew of, the girl who lived in there was Elise. her sister Laura went to school with me, and she worked at Target or Target, and somebody came in with an ID, and it was that address, and she goes, "Oh, you live in the haunted house?" And then she goes, and she told her, and she goes, "Oh, I'm so glad to know that." Said, "My son has been talking to this woman that is at the end of the hall near the aquarium, and we thought he was going crazy." And
Oh,
so they moved. The house became abandoned. And a few years ago, before I moved to down here, they were going to tear it down. And I went to look at what they were doing. And when they tore the basement down, there was an old well. And
oh, really?
we believe, so I believe my grandmother, I think Granny was right. I think, I think the woman killed that man because he was coming to kill her, and she put him in the well and then just sealed the well. And, he's still on that property. And they built houses on top of it now. And I'm like, you couldn't give it to me.
No.
Because it's not a happy ghost, but it was interesting though. I was very interested in it. But but my grandmother could tell great ghost stories, and but they would see ghosts. I mean, her and my grandfather both were psychic, but he was more like, um I'll show them, because they lived in a house in Akron. The first, when they were young and married and had like 4 or 5 kids before they had
Right.
10, before they figured out where kids come from. And they lived in this place in Akron. And my pappy would go and work. He was working, he would do all sorts of jobs. And she was at home with the kids, and there was a stairwell. And she would hear someone coming up to the door, and thought it would be Pappy, and she'd open the door. Nobody would be there. And at night, they would lock the door, and she would wake up first in the morning, and the door would always be open. And so she knew it was haunted, but she wouldn't tell him, because she thought he would think she was nuts. And finally, he found the door open, and he started griping at her. She said, "Oh, no, no, no." It's, and told him about, there's some kind of ghost that's coming up the
Right.
stairs, and it opens the door. And he goes, "Well, I'll show it." And this is like 1917. So he goes and gets a thumb lock, a chain lock, and a bolt. And he puts 3 locks on this door. Because my grandfather, I'm kind of like him. We're kind of like,
A little
"I'll
bit.
show you." And he put those on, put the chain on, did the thumb lock, did the bolt, put a chair up under that thing, and he said, "Now, open it." So they went to bed. They got up in the morning. The chair is moved over to the side. The chain is unlocked. The thumb latch is undone. The bolt is undone. And the door is open. So they very quietly went to the landlady and said, "We're going to move. Thank you." And she says, "Fine, but can you tell me why?" And they told her why. And she said, "Oh," she said, "we have not been able to keep anyone in there." She said, a few years ago, because the house was actually about 11 years old back in 1917. And she said the man who owned it was a doctor, and he got what they at the time called a felon on his thumb, which was he had bone cancer, and he had a tumor that was hurting him very badly, and he would pace the floor all night long. And he drank acid and killed himself. And that's the doctor coming to make a house call at night. And they lived in
Wow.
several places that were haunted, and because they liked broken down little old spooky houses. And But that one, my pappy would tell that one. He would go, "Oh yeah," rah, rah, rah. And but they believed in ghosts. They believed in psychic abilities, and I grew up with that. And then once I had my experiences, I found out, I was
They
psychic
were right. Yeah.
and dropped on my head, talked to the dead kind of thing. And they were right, you know. And so and it's become a huge part of my life. But so I love ghost stories. I love the spooky part. I mean, I love Halloween. Halloween is every day is Halloween for
Yes.
me. Um,
Well, and you're such a good
but Christmas,
storyteller.
yeah, when you can bring the spooky into Christmas, it makes
Yes.
it a little cozier. Because if you get a little bit more on the couch and watch a scary movie or listen to a scary story, because the ghost story books we're going to do, um, you can put them on. We put them on audio books now, and you can just put it on audio and just listen to the ghost story. And
Yeah.
so I think it's going to be fascinating because it's a new technique. I mean, you can have your books read by, but it's going back to the old fashioned storytelling. You can put it on and be told that story while you're sitting by the fire or on the couch or and listen to the ghost story being told. I had two aunts who during the 30s, they would only have the radio, which
Right.
that
Yeah.
was the major entertainment. So they had the inner sanctum and all these scary stories. So my aunts would sit and listen. They'd listen to the scary stories, but one of them would have a butcher knife and the other one would hold a shotgun. And they'd listen to ghost stories, at
That's
night,
funny. I'm
scared
sorry.
half to death. And so and it was hysterical. And and they were tough. One of those aunts, I would have, a ghost
Yeah.
would have been scared of her. And but they would sit there with their shotgun. My Aunt Frances May, a prissy little girl, with they weren't going to let the ghosts get them. So um, it's no different then than it is now. And actually, like I said, when we do the books, you can listen to them on audiobook, and then it'll be like hearing, just storytelling. So we're advanced, but we're also that's kind of like an old fashioned thing. It's taking you back to storytelling,
Well, it is. And,
and
I find that interesting because you can put the
I
inflections
just
that
think
you
it's going to be a
want.
lot of fun. I'm going to be doing all year long. It's going to be, you know, living in the good old days again.
Yeah.
So I'm ready for it. Bring it
You're ready for
on.
everything. You do so much.
I'll be making uh uh since I'm going to do my cooking show, I'll be making all these old fashioned cookies and desserts and make me some cherry bounce and sit there and sip some cherry bounce while I listen to ghost stories.
I love that. That's going to be so much fun.
It
Well, we are almost out
is,
of
and I'm
time,
working
believe
at
it or
it.
not.
I keep telling people I was waiting. Huh? So
I
what?
said that we're almost out of time.
What did you say?
6 minutes.
Oh well, my big mouth has been flapping all this time. Okay.
I
Okay.
love it when you talk. I love it when you tell
Well,
stories because that's one of my favorite things you do. So
Oh, well, thank you.
It's always
I have
fun.
fun. I can't stop myself. I went from being I was a shy violet when I was young, and so now I've made up for it.
Yes, you have. I like that.
And my mother can't stand to hear my voice, so it's a good thing she's not here to hear it anymore. she, she would go, that voice. It's
And
funny.
everybody else I know
It's
loves your
funny.
voice. So, and Lori said, great show. I think you were fantastic. I loved it. And yeah, even with the audio issues that we were having here, I think it turned out so well.
Oh,
We should have,
it's what I've been given. Oh, well, thank
well,
you.
yeah. I mean, you do what you can with what you got, but you do good. And I just appreciate that
Well, it is what it is, so I'm going to make it work.
I just appreciate that you've been here and that you shared so much. And, it's so interesting, I think, because a lot of people in our country don't really consider the spooky side of Christmas. And it's so historic. It's been all over the world. Sue actually said that, a lot of the Victorian area playfulness regarding ghosts and the paranormal ended with the arrival of World War One, which took so many lives. The war showed that there were far bigger issues at stake, and the symbolism of death became less amusing. I could see that, but it seems to have turned a corner and has come back into favor because there's so many people that are like ghost hunters,
Yeah.
and versus investigators. And I think that that carries a lot of the same energy.
Yeah.
So,
Well, to me, the whole point of the thing with like the spooky with the Santas and all, I mean, with the Christmas is nothing makes you feel more alive than death.
yeah,
And when you tell stories about ghosts,
yeah,
the telling ghost stories, telling stories of things that have died and come back and all that is, nothing makes you feel more alive than being, than that. I mean, knowing that you're alive, being scary, and so they alive by using death by scaring you.
yeah.
So it's a high.
It is a high. And we're going to have to say bye because we're going to run out. Thank you so much for being here. I just love getting to talk to you. And for everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed it. I know that the audio is a little wonky, but you know what? It's still
Well, it was
marketable
fun.
and it's
It
still a
was
good
fun.
time. So I I appreciate you. We will see you next time and keep listening.
Well, whatever they can hear. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you.